You're listening to The Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to The Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and this week, a little bit earlier than normal, we got some predictions today for the Thanksgiving slate of games as well as the Black Friday matchup. So we're just doing 4 predictions in this video here, and then on Friday, I'll drop the other 12 predictions I have for the remainder of Week 13 for the NFL. A lot of interesting matchups here. There is one that had me really stumped on this one. The other one's not so much, but let me know. Comment down below. Let me hear from you all. Who are you taking in these 4 games here? Who do you like? What do you like about them? What do you dislike about their opponent or just the matchup altogether? Fire away and let me hear from you. But we will start with the very first game. We'll work our way in order, starting with Thursday at the earliest, working all the way to the Black Friday matchup at 3 p.m. on Friday. And we begin with the Chicago Bears heading into Detroit to take on the Lions. Lions coming into this matchup with a whopping 177-point differential. They are 71 points ahead of the team in second place. It's not even close the way the Lions have been beating down some of their opponents. Meanwhile, the Bears on a 5-game losing skid since coming out of their bye week. So it's been a tough going for Chicago. Meanwhile, the Lions just kind of continue to roll and beat down anyone that they are coming across. So first thing I'll be looking at here is how this Bears defense is going to handle the 1-2 punch, the Sonic and Knuckles of Detroit, and that is Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Both guys are currently on pace for at least 1,000 yards rushing this season, and with Chicago allowing about 111 yards per game to running backs, which is good for 8th most in the league right now, there is a good chance that we see these two guys continue to run wild. Even if maybe they hold them off a little bit early in the game, by the second half, third quarter, fourth quarter, I'm sure these two are going to be having their way. It just seems to be inevitable the way that they've been playing this season, and nobody has really found much of an answer to stop either of them. The other thing I'll be watching, and I think this will actually be a really good matchup, is just Jared Goff going up against that secondary and all the guys that are dropping back in coverage for the Bears here, because for what it's worth, the Bears secondary, pretty damn good unit of guys. I like them just overall as a unit, really strong and tough opponent here. But Jared Goff right now, and one thing that stuck out, and this is per Next Gen Stats here, he leads the NFL specifically in yards and completion percentage versus single high safety, those cover one type looks. And the reason that's notable is because the Bears have deployed, as far as single high safety, cover one, whatever you want to call it, those types of looks at a whopping 60.5% of the time, which is the 5th highest usage in the league. That being said, I will say for what it's worth, like I mentioned, Chicago with guys like Jalen Johnson and company, I do like them a little bit more than some of the other defenses in the league that might be deploying that same style of coverage as often as they are. But Jared Goff has been money this season. He has been very problematic when he is given the opportunity to do so. And just seeing that stat alone kind of stuck out to me and jumped out. So I figured it's at least worth mentioning here, something to keep an eye on. The other thing that is in the back of my mind here, and it's one that has been kind of an issue since the Bears have come out of the bye week, and last week it actually it looked decent, was just the Bears' ability to throw the football and Caleb Williams as a whole. Lions rank 8th in passing yards per game allowed right now, and they are also sitting on a league low of just 7 total passing touchdowns, one of a very few amount of teams right now still under that double-digit total. They have been really good defending the pass, and that was a weakness for Detroit last season, and they've done that kind of worst to first flip here because they are one of the best units in the NFL when it comes to defending it now, and that was not the case last season. Caleb Williams has been struggling basically all season. It's been very up and down. He's had a few highs here and there, but a lot of lows. The one thing that really stuck out to me a handful of weeks ago, and honestly at this point it might be more than a month ago, when the Bears played the Colts, it was more than a month ago because they haven't won since their bye week. So when the Bears played the Colts, this is like almost 2 months ago now at this point here, when they took them down, the big thing that I noticed, especially in the second half, was they shortened up the passing game. They started getting the ball out of Caleb Williams' hand extremely quick, and the offense found some rhythm. And interestingly enough, over the last couple of weeks, Caleb Williams has been working to get the ball out far quicker than he has been through the majority of the season. And the numbers are showing If the Bears' passing offense is short, it's quick, they're getting the ball out of Caleb Williams' hand very quickly, they're not forcing him to hold on to the football and make all these crazy plays where he's scrambling all over the pocket to try to make a first down, things start to look really good. Throwing in under 2.5 seconds, which Next Gen Stats designates as a quick throw, he's sitting on 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 77% completion percentage. When he starts getting into those longer throws, when you're talking 2.5 seconds or more, and he at one point was averaging 2.9 seconds per throw, 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and his completion percentage plummets 25% down to about 52% completion rate. I think the Bears, if they keep the offense short and quick the way they've been doing the last couple of weeks here, and the offense has also been using a lot more motion over the last few weeks as well, with obviously the firing of Shane Waldron, I do think that there's a chance that maybe things could get a little bit more interesting in this game between the two teams. But for me, the Lions and just the way that they have been playing is undeniable right now. And I don't really know if there's anyone remaining on the Lions schedule that can actually beat them. There's a chance, obviously, with division rivals, anything can happen, and we've talked about this before. The NFC North and just those northern divisions, in my opinion, the records seem to go out the window. Things get just absolutely wonky with those matchups, and the North, the score can be anywhere. In the NFC, for the AFC North, it's more just like gritty, low-scoring defensive football, but with the NFC North, it's like, again, records go out the window, people forget who they are, and teams will play way better than they are. The better team typically plays down to the lesser team. It's always interesting the way it plays out. So I'll take the Lions. I do think that in some, there is a reality out there where the Bears maybe hang around a little bit, but ultimately, if I had to put a score on this game here, as I'm taking the Lions as the winner, I'm thinking the Lions something along the lines of like 38 to maybe 28. Something like that. I think maybe the Bears find some points here if they keep their offense quick the way that it's been trending the last couple of weeks, and maybe like a late score makes that final total look like the Bears hung around a little bit more than they actually did, where that 38-28 is coming from. But ultimately, I do think that Lions come away with a win here. They put up a lot of points, and it ends up being a fairly comfortable win for them. Now we'll have the New York Giants going into Dallas. This is the midday game of Thanksgiving here, as everyone's favorite quarterback matchup of the season, Tommy DeVito, it appears, unless that injury is as serious as it is, or is it sounding potentially, and we end up getting someone like Drew Lock instead, versus Cooper Rush. This game on paper, even prior to the season starting, was never super appealing to me, and right now, this is you're either eating with the family, or if you are a family that eats lunch at 11:30 a.m. on Thanksgiving, you're probably taking your nap by the time the game kicks off here. So this is either your family time game where you're sitting there eating, or you are taking that nap. First thing I'm looking at here, and this is one that I'm very curious to see play out. Now, the shocking news of Azeez Ojulari going down to IR as Kayvon Thibodeau is making his way back, definitely devastating, because that kind of changed my outlook on this football game. The way I was thinking initially with Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau coming back into the fold, and Azeez Ojulari, who's looked really good in the absence of Thibodeau, I was thinking, man, this Cowboys pass protection is going to have a problem. It's going to be a long game for them, especially with Cooper Rush in the backfield. You never really know how that's going to go. So now that Azeez Ojulari's on IR, and I mean, with however many games they have left, presumably done for the season potentially, it does kind of change things up a little bit, but they still have such a good group of guys there. I mean, New York, as far as pass rush is concerned, ranks first in the NFL in sack rate, 36 sacks altogether on the season, which puts them at 5th most in the league. The Cowboys O-line has allowed about 30 sacks this season, so there is still a bit of a mismatch there, in my opinion. The Cowboys O-line has not necessarily been the greatest this year, but I'm not as worried about it, knowing that the Giants are going to be a little bit thinner than I was anticipating initially coming into this game. But it is something worth keeping an eye on there, because those guys up front on the defense in New York have been a problem. The other thing I'm keeping an eye on here, Malik Neighbors. Clearly, very clearly unhappy with the way this offense has looked over the last few weeks, and last week felt like a bit of a tipping point, as he had not seen the football until the team was down 30 points. I mean, I get it. I do. I really do. I mean, you look at his numbers prior to his concussion. 52 targets in 4 games, and then once he ends up getting that concussion and coming back over the 5 games after, he has only 51 targets. So his target share has gone down a little bit since that concussion, but I mean, it's one of those things where maybe it's just a matter of just the games and the way the situation has played itself out. I don't necessarily know. Maybe them just trying to, take care of Malik Neighbors coming back off a concussion. I don't know, but this is a guy that he is the most talented player on your offense right now, and he should be seeing no less than 10 targets a game. And that's kind of the way I think of it. And there are games where he was not seeing 10 targets in a game, and he should be seeing it early and often. He's the kind of guy you want to get going early and start to get it going and start getting him hot and just get the ball in his hands. He is a legitimate playmaker. We've seen from him many a times this season just how big of a difference he could be for this offense. And you even saw it in week 4 against the Cowboys in a really tough loss, 20-15 to Dallas in New York. He had 12 receptions, 115 yards. Like, this is a guy who's a playmaker for you. He needs to get the football. On the flip side of things, with the Cowboys, keeping an eye on CeeDee Lamb is definitely something I will be watching here. Cooper Rush has no issues throwing it to CeeDee Lamb, especially with the way this offense is right now. It kind of goes through him at this point here, so I'll be expecting a lot of the target share to be going to CD, and I will be interested to see how defensive back Deonte Banks ends up faring against him, because the last time these two teams met, Banks lined up across from him, I believe, about 13 times in that initial matchup there. He allowed 3 receptions for 76 yards, so Lamb did get the better of him in certain spots here. I will be curious to see how those two match up again, because a lot of Deonte Banks' work the first time around went against CeeDee Lamb, and I'm assuming that's going to be very similar again this week as well. So definitely a cornerback wide receiver matchup to keep an eye on. And then the last thing I'll be keeping an eye on here is going to be if the Cowboys have any sort of ability to run the football in this game here. Rico Dowdle's obviously been the lead back for a while now, and the way the Cowboys have looked this year running the football has been pretty god-awful. I mean, they're sitting on about 82 yards rushing per game right now, which is good for second fewest in the league, with a second lowest of 3.7 yards per attempt as well. Running the football has not been a strong suit for Dallas. Like I said, the offensive line's been struggling. Running back situation's not necessarily the greatest. Zeke has fallen off a cliff. The Dalvin Cook has been available for the team, I believe, for the last 3 weeks now, and has yet to be elevated. Maybe this ends up being the week. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out tomorrow if maybe they do a last ditch, hey, let's see if we can finally get something going with him on Thanksgiving type deal. But the way I see it right now, they can't run the football, and the plus for them in this game here is that the Giants, for all the success that defensive front has had rushing the passer, they have not been great necessarily stopping the run, allowing about 150 yards per game. They're good for third highest in the league right now with a 5.2 yard per attempt margin, which is the highest in the NFL amongst anyone allowing the running backs and company to move. This could be the game that Dallas does find some of that success. So I will be interested to see how that works itself out. You have basically the worst rushing offense going against basically the worst run defense in the NFL. Somebody has to give and find some success, right? That being said, as for who I think is going to win, this is probably the hardest game of these 4 that we're talking here to pick on. And for a long time, I was really leaning on the Giants, but I am a little bit scared right now with just the current situation, and it feels like Brian Daboll and company are about one bad loss away from potentially getting fired. And after watching them get embarrassed last week in Tampa Bay, there is a piece of me that wants to go New York. They get it coming off of an ugly loss, an upset over the Cowboys, who still have yet to win a football game in the calendar year 2024. However, I think I'm going to go Dallas here. On Thanksgiving, there's just a gut feeling that I have that they finally get that home win that they need as the year is closing out with just a little bit of time remaining. But also, when I look at the way these two teams looked in comparison last week, the Giants, that offense did not look good. And I feel like the way the Daniel Jones situation broke itself out and just kind of ended, I think that had an effect on the locker room. I think it had an effect on how some of the players look at Brian Daboll and some of the other front office guys. And ultimately, I think the locker room may be lost in New York. So that's what's really scaring me away, because I do kind of feel like the Giants could potentially get the win here and keep the Cowboys out of winning a game for another, few weeks or so in Dallas. But again, I'm concerned about the state of that locker room right now, and those concerns are deeply rooted in how poor that offense looked last week after the change from Daniel Jones and the release and all that. So we'll see if I'm wrong, but I'll take the Cowboys in the win here. It's not going to be a crazy win by any means. I wouldn't be shocked if the final score is like 23-17, something a little bit lower scoring, but I will take the Cowboys. Then to wrap up the Thanksgiving games, Miami going into Green Bay to take on the Packers here. The big thing that stands out to me in this game here, and it of course has to be the first thing that we talk about, is going to be the weather in this football game. In Lambeau, at night, Thanksgiving, we are late in November. This is a late time of year for Thanksgiving as well. I believe I thought Thanksgiving was usually the third Thursday of November, and I don't know if that's just something I've had in my head, but for it to be on the 28th this year, I feel like is super late. That being said, temperatures well below freezing. We're looking at about a 26 degrees or so at kickoff here with a slight chance of some snow flurries as well. The Dolphins have lost 11 straight games now at this point when the kickoff temperature is below 40 degrees. For whatever the reason may be, maybe it's just the massive and stark contrast of temperature and just what you're used to as a Dolphins team in Miami, going up to a team all the way in the north, dealing with frigid temperatures like this. Miami has not been up to the task, and that showed itself in a pretty ugly way as recently as last year against the Chiefs in the playoffs. And I think the path to success for Miami in this game, obviously you look at the wide receiver, or just the receivers as a whole. So wide receivers, tight ends, guys catching out of the backfield, just the people catching the football as a whole. You got a lot of talent in Miami. You're looking at Tyreek Hill. You're looking at Jalen Waddle. Jonnu Smith is having a season for them. Devon Achane, I believe, is sitting around like 40 receptions himself as a running back. This is a team that, while they might be ranked like 19th in passing yards per game right now this season, when Tua's under center, they're averaging nearly like half a football field more of yards through the air. So those numbers are skewed with the Tua missing situation, but overall, this is an offense that can throw the football with the best of them, and you're going up against a Packers team that, of course, has Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, you have Tucker Kraft, you have Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks. You have a very talented group of wide receivers on both sides of the ball here, so you think naturally, all right, well, maybe they find themselves in a little bit of a shootout. Both these defenses have been leaky at times against the pass, even though Miami's pass rush has started to figure it out and get really effective as of late over the last 3 weeks or so. But for me, the key to this football game in these frigid temperatures really is going to come down to who is going to grind out their opponent running the football in this game here. The Packers right now averaging about 152 yards per game rushing. They are the third best rushing offense in the league at this current moment as it stands. The Dolphins are sitting around 117 yards per game, but they are averaging just about 71 in the last 3 games. So those rushing numbers have dipped a bit as they just it feels like they've been a little bit more pass heavy than anything else in their last few weeks of games. The temperatures of this game, as stopping the run already being a difficult task, especially in the NFL, is when it starts to get cold and those limbs start to get numb and you can't feel your nose and it's running and maybe your eyes are burning because the winds are going a little bit, and it's just overall extremely uncomfortable. If you can't stop the run, you're gonna get bulldozed over here. And there's nothing less fun than when you can't feel your fingers, you can't feel your toes, you're cold down to the bone, and you have guys like Josh Jacobs who have no issue running the football nearly 30 times a football game, just down after down, punching you in the mouth. Whatever team deploys the more effective rushing attack, in my opinion, comes away with a victory here. And for what I have seen from this Packers team, they have no issue running the football if the game calls for it. We saw it when Jordan Love was out with Malik Willis under center. There is a clear willingness to get the job done on the ground if they need to. And again, that Miami Dolphins in frigid temperatures thing is just sitting in the back of my mind, and I can't really avoid it. And at some point, that losing streak is going to have to get snapped, but I do not think it's going to be against this Packers team that is one of the best in forcing turnovers as well. I just feel like this is kind of setting up for an ugly performance from Miami again. Not necessarily the right defense you want to be going up against in these frigid temperatures here. So I'm going to go with the Green Bay Packers. I think the game ends up being a little bit more low scoring because I don't want to sit here and act like the Packers have the key to success in frigid temperatures themselves, because Lambeau has not necessarily been the biggest home field advantage over the last, decade or so during the Aaron Rodgers time frame and some of the losses that they've taken in these cold weather games themselves. But I do think that Green Bay is more suited for this game than anything else here, as Miami has clearly struggled over the last, 11 games that they've played in 40 or sub 40 degree weather. Give me the Packers. I think something along the lines of like a 27-20 type of game here. I think Miami does have a little bit more success than what we saw in those very frigid temperatures against KC last year. We're still fairly close to freezing. 26 degrees isn't that far off. It's still very cold, but I do think that we see a decent amount of points from both sides, but I think pounding the rock is going to be key to victory here, and I really like Green Bay a little bit more in that department. And then finally, we have ourselves on Friday, Black Friday. I love that we're doing this now. This is my type of thing. We get some Thursday night football all day, basically, and then we have Friday night football, and then we get into Sunday where we have 12 more games. Like, this is my cup of tea in the NFL here. We also got the Monday night football game as well. Like, we're talking 4 different days of football, and there's no barring the Sunday stuff because it happens every week, but like there's no multiple games going on at the same time. You get one game after another Sunday and then a Monday night game. That is what I love about this time of year in football. The Raiders heading into Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. As everyone is well aware, Patrick Mahomes owns the Las Vegas Raiders. 32 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions, averaging nearly 300 yards per game when he plays the Raiders. You have Aiden O'Connell, who looks like he's going to be the one suiting up at quarterback for the Raiders right now. And to be honest, I'm really not giving the Raiders a ton in this. It's between not being able to run the football, having this merry-go-round at quarterback that you've been dealing with through the duration of the season here. Yes, you have some exciting pieces on offense. Like Jacoby Myers is maybe your best wide receiver right now. And then you have, of course, Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. So you have some really fun tight ends as well. And Brock Bowers has been awesome this season. But, I mean, beyond that, the offense has just been so flat, and that inconsistency and inability to run the football has made them so one-dimensional, and they're not built to pass the football 35, 40 times in a football game. I just don't know what the path to success here is, other than it's a division matchup, and for whatever reason, divisional games are always closer. You know your opponent a little bit better. Like maybe the Raiders catch the Chiefs, who are having somewhat of a slip-up, kind of not down year on offense, but just it's not what we are used to. It's far more defensively led. And we even saw last week a team like the Carolina Panthers found a way to hang around with the Chiefs as they kind of couldn't get out of their own way with some defensive penalties. So believe me, even if I am leaning super heavy Chiefs in this, I know that there is an avenue somewhere for the Raiders to find the win. I don't really see it. Coupled that with the fact that it sounds like Isaiah Pacheco is going to be back in the backfield for the Kansas City Chiefs. This is only going to make this offense better. Losing Pacheco and then having Kareem Hunt step in was probably the best thing that the Chiefs could have had happen with that situation. But now, with how good Kareem Hunt has looked for Kansas City, you have Kareem Hunt backing up Pacheco, who is one of the angriest runners we have ever seen. He runs and stomps his feet like he hates the ground. It's only going to open things up for the passing attack, for Kelsey, for Hopkins, for Xavier Worthy. This could be a bit of a nightmare situation on Black Friday in Las Vegas. And I'm not saying it's the game that gets Antonio Pierce fired, but there is potential that this game gets a little bit out of hand. That being said, I do think I like the Chiefs in this game here. If you couldn't already tell, I'm just very comfortable with the Chiefs' victory overall. We're looking at all favorites for these first 4 games here, and all home teams on top of that. And that was something that I was having a really hard time with, because the likelihood that we just get 4 straight home team victories is, the odds are kind of stacked against you on that. But the way this whole slate of games here from Thursday to Friday shake out to me, there's 3 obviously better teams in better situations coming into these matchups right now. And I don't want to say that the Packers are obviously better than the Dolphins. Record-wise, they obviously are. But like that matchup and the weather situation clearly favors Green Bay. And the only real toss-up I had was just the Giants and Cowboys. So we're looking at 4 home teams. I like the Kansas City Chiefs in this last matchup here. And I'm thinking maybe there's going to be some more upsets come Sunday and Monday, but that's just kind of where my head is at right now. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of the Thanksgiving games? What do you think of the Black Friday matchup? Are you giving the Raiders a shot against the Chiefs right now? Are you giving, any of the teams that are in the tough spot, the Bears, the Dolphins, in their situations where things feel a little impossible going into the matchup that they're going up against, can they get the win? Let me hear from you all. Give me some good reasons as to why. But as always, if you made it to the end, greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all on Friday for the remaining picks. Have a good one.